And so we're in the process of reselling those into private ownership so that people, because we aren't just trying to gain land, we want to gain land that can benefit the hunters and anglers of Kansas and our visitors. So those pieces of land that are scattered throughout, unlike this one, we are looking to give back or sell back as we can. However, Kansas residents, as we survey them, which we do every year, are citing crowded public lands as a disincentive for their hunting. And we're seeing some of our hunting license sales to residents going down as a result, and that's of real concern. So we are looking at strategic purchases, just like this one in Kingman County, around the state, associated with existing land, like this one, to reduce stress on the lands we do have and are able to manage, and to provide more opportunities for hunters and fishermen. Interestingly, this piece, we don't have many opportunities to float on rivers in Kansas because most of them aren't available to the public. But with this purchase, it would gain us about 9 miles of land along the Ninneskah there, which is a gorgeous river if you've never seen it. And so what we're hopeful, there's a livery, a canoe livery that opened up just recently in Hutchinson, where a private individual saw an opportunity around town to float the river that runs right through Hutch. And we're hoping to do the same thing on this piece, not to make money, but to provide access to the public where they can have a nice afternoon float through one of the prettiest streams in Kansas. And so we're looking forward to that. And this purchase of this land will help us make that an opportunity for residents and non-residents both. So being near Wichita, the Byron Walker Wildlife Area is one of the department's most heavily used properties, averaging more than 60,000 use days per year and generating just under $7 million in related revenues to the city of Kingman and the surrounding county. So we really appreciate the opportunity to testify on behalf of this bill, and I would stand for questions if you choose.
Thank you. Secretary, just for information for some new members on this committee, the department worked with some local farmers that was managing this property prior, and would you mind just giving a little brief, because that turned out really well, and I think it's important information for our committee.
Thank you for pointing that out. We did. One of the things that happened initially, there were some other people that were interested in this land, and they didn't get the bid that Ducks Unlimited did. It was all fair market value, so it didn't exceed that, but nevertheless, they didn't get the bid. So there was some misunderstanding about that over time, and through the process of conversation, it caused us to sit down at the cafe in Kingman, as a matter of fact, eating chicken fried steaks with those local farmers, and we said, help us understand what you really want. And they said, you know, the ground that you guys have down close to the river, we aren't interested in. It's not great grazing ground, but that crop ground up on the hill, we really are interested in that. And of course, the crop ground isn't what interests us so much. So there's really an opportunity for a win-win where we were able to, Ducks Unlimited, who owns the land, was able to make a trade, basically. And we picked up some ground down the river we weren't even thinking about, which they didn't put a lot of value on, but was really helpful in terms of helping the public access the river more easily. So it was a win-win. They got crop ground. We got some ground that provided better access to the river a little ways away. And so those kind of conversations, you know, you always benefit from talking to people. And what we're doing over time, this is a prime example, is we're going to get better at talking with our neighbors and being a better neighbor.
Thank you, and for all the hard work on that and getting that done. And the other thing that's in here is the property taxes will continue to be paid, and that's always two big issues with you know, local landowners. So you took care of both of them.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, Senator Hawk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to you and the department. Just a quick question. From what the reviser said, this is 493 acres approximately, but the requirements that you must meet the A, B, C, and D, or A, B, and C, if it's less than 640 acres. So why do you have to meet those requirements?
So all those requirements we meet voluntarily. We do those as a matter of course. We know that it's hard for a county to lose property taxes. I live in a rural county. I know the impact of that. So we, again, want to be a good neighbor. So we'll on these lands that we're purchasing, we will pay that payment in lieu of taxes in that exact same amount. Of course, we manage the weeds just like any neighbor would, to keep those noxious weeds down. And the management plan, we have really, these are very valuable lands for us. They get a lot of use. We spend a lot of time managing those. So all those requirements are just common sense to us.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I was just trying to, on the noxious weeds, is there a lot of cost in that? I'm kind of learning that part. What kind of cost do you see once it becomes land that belongs to the state going forward?
Well, so part of it's crop ground, no challenges there. The folks managing those crops will take care of that. But as you go below that crop ground between there and the river, it's kind of rough ground. It's got trees, which we'll remove because we want to encourage that native grass. Well, that's not a noxious weed. That'd be part of our management. Sericea lespedeza is a challenge in that part of the state. And so managing that, thistles, we have to watch that all the time. The nice thing is, if you keep on top of that, it doesn't get tremendously expensive. It's just an annual cost that you have to bear. So it's not a prohibitive expense as long as you stay on top of it, and our folks are really good at that.
Other questions? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned about the access to the Ninishaw River. So is there currently any access close to that location?
So it's, because that's not one of the public rivers in Kansas, you have to have permission from both landowners on both sides, which is hard to do. We own several miles downstream, and with this, it will give us a key piece. It's on the south side of the river, but it connects to a county road with a bridge that goes across the river. So both access, it'll lengthen the stream that we have access to, but then it'll also provide great access because that bridge is right there. We can make a parking area once we own this ground, a small parking area so people can pull off and put in right there. Now, I will tell you, it's not as simple as maybe I've portrayed it. We don't own every piece that touches on that river. There are some corners that come down to the river, so we would have to work out things with those neighbors to where we have an easement so that the public, if they had to step out on the shore on one side of the river, they were always comfortable and nobody was getting upset. So we have a little bit of work to do, but basically it's a beautiful stretch of river, and with a little bit of work and the addition of this piece of ground, we think we can have a wonderful opportunities for a family to take an afternoon float trip. And it's a sandy bottom area. There are great fish species there, very healthy, and it's a wonderful part of Kansas.
Thank you.
Senator Kirschen.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your presentation today. It's been a long time coming, but so the cultivated ground, is that rented out? Is there a tenant for that? Or the cropland?
The cropland. So right now, typically we don't farm our own ground. We rent that out to local tenants anyway. And so those folks are farming it right now, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so Ducks Unlimited owns the ground. They lease it to the DeWeese brothers who farm it, and so they're doing it currently. Yep.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Brad. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, we will have Jeff Hancock with the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Welcome, committee, Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Again, my name is Jeff Hancock. I'm a board member and vice chair of the Kansas chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Thank you for allowing us to present testimony today on Senate Bill number 145. Kansas chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers is a proponent of this bill. We're often known as BHA, and we are the fastest growing conservation organization in the United States right now with over 40,000 members in every state. We coin ourselves as the voice for our public lands, waters, and wildlife. The Byron Walker Wildlife Area is a treasure for the state of Kansas. As a young outdoorsman, I spent many memories, and have a lot of good experiences of hunting quail in the Byron Walker Wildlife Area with my grandfather. In terms of publicly owned property, it's a gem for the state of Kansas and all kinds of outdoorsmen and women, from hunters and fishermen to hikers and bird watchers. We have a great hunter access program in Kansas called Walk-In Hunting Access, commonly known as WEHA, whereby hunters are granted access to over 1 million acres of private land annually through public leases. However, the WEHA program is limited by priorities for ag production versus sound habitat access, and most importantly, its use is limited to only hunting. It is imperative we have unrestricted public land preserved for access and managed as a wildlife resource moving forward. The addition of 493 acres of land at Byron Walker through Senate Bill number 145 does all this. This acquisition provides Kansans, and wildlife for that matter, a quality place to do a variety of outdoor activities in an area preserved for the betterment of both. On a personal note, my day job is the ownership and management of an engineering company in Manhattan. Young people entering the workforce are more interested in time and quality of life rather than money. We need this workforce of young people to attract business to Kansas. Employees more than ever will move or stay for a high-quality life given opportunity beyond that offered in a job. One piece of the workforce puzzle is having quality and publicly accessible land available with natural environs. If this land was any closer to Manhattan, I would absolutely sell its relevance to the quality of life of potential candidates at my company. The acquisition of this property in Kingman County just makes sense, provides perpetual access to public land for the benefit of Kansans. Whether you hunt, fish, hike, canoe, kayak, or do any variety of outdoor activities, or care about wildlife in general, this acquisition is important. So with that, please support Senate Bill number 145, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. Next, we'll have Jim Pittman from Ducks Unlimited. Welcome, committee, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today in support of Senate Bill number 145. My name is Jim Pittman. I'm a biologist with Ducks Unlimited, based in Emporia, Kansas, and I've been working in the conservation field in Kansas for more than 20 years now, and been a lifelong sportsman myself. Ducks Unlimited is a science-based organization with a focus on wetlands and conservation and waterfowl. We have a membership of about 15,000 sports persons in Kansas and 650,000 nationally. We currently own the piece of property that's in question, and we acquired it back in 2017 when we were approached by the Shalene family in Kingman County to purchase the tract. It made a lot of sense to us because it has a very high conservation value, which I'll talk about in a minute, and it was also immediately adjacent to Byron Walker Wildlife Area. We purchased it from those sellers at the appraised value, and as you heard earlier from the Secretary, we maintained the same tenant, and we even brokered a land swap with that tenant to help him improve his agricultural operation and provide us with some additional habitat and river access on the tract that we do own. During our ownership, we paid taxes to the county each year. The current tract that we own is, as you heard, 493 acres. It shares 1 3/4 miles of boundary with the wildlife area. It contains 1.2 miles of the South Fork of the Nenasko River, which adjoining with the wildlife area could potentially provide up to 9 miles of river access on a fantastic river in the state. In addition to the Nenasko, it also includes 1.2 miles of Mead Creek. There's greater than 40 acres of emergent wetlands, and now there's a sizable tract of native grass. So it's a really diverse property, and because of that, it has some really high conservation values. Most notably, and of interest to us, is it has one of the highest overwintering mallard populations in the state. And so that's really important in our eyes to try to preserve in perpetuity. In addition to waterfowl habitat. It also provides habitat for a host of other species because of that diversity I talked about. And some of those other species include game animals such as white-tailed deer and turkeys, pheasants. There's bobwhites on the property. The river has sport fish such as bass and catfish. There's also a host of non-game species, including some threatened, endangered, and species in need of conservation that the department has identified during sampling. So it's a whole host of values to different wildlife species. In addition to that, it has some unique recreational opportunities, which you heard about from the Secretary. And it will provide new opportunities for lots of different types of hunting, fishing, canoeing, kayaking, and also wildlife viewing, which is really popular, including things such as bird watching. In addition to that, it's uniquely located less than 45 miles from Wichita, as you know, our biggest urban center. And so the tract of land will be available to hundreds of thousands of Kansans, which is really important given that only about 2% of the state is in public ownership, which ranks 49th in the country. And so in addition to those recreational opportunities and close proximity to our largest urban center, there's also a substantial economic benefit to some of the local communities. You heard some of those figures from Secretary Lovelace. That the Byron Walker Wildlife Area brings in roughly $7 million a year based on a U.S. Fish and Wildlife survey that was recently completed. And so adding to that tract of land only serves to sustain and potentially increase some of that economic benefit to the local community. And so in our mind, in Ducks Unlimited mind, it makes a lot of sense for this tract to be in public ownership due to those high conservation values I talked about, the added recreational opportunities it will provide, as well as the economic benefits that the local community will receive as a benefit. In addition, it's immediately adjacent to an existing wildlife area, which makes it logistically relatively easy for the department to manage going into the future. And so, as the Secretary mentioned, if this bill is approved and the department is able to acquire this tract from us, they would do so at appraised value using fee funds and some private donor money. And the department would continue to pay the county a fee equivalent to the tax rate going forward. And so, in conclusion, Ducks Unlimited would like to urge the committee to recommend passage of Senate Bill 145 and allow the department to acquire it from us so the public can realize all those benefits I just mentioned. And so, with that, I thank you for your time today, and I appreciate your service to the people of Kansas, and I stand for questions.
Thank you, Jim. Was there any questions for Jim? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, I was wondering, do they have any reserves in the area? Or are you guys worried all about hunting pressure from Wichita and the 2%? Just thought you might say a sentence
Well,
about that.
yeah, well, I mean, that's part of the benefit of adding this tract is try to alleviate some of the pressure from the public lands that are already available. And so if we get into the situation, you know, this is where Secretary Lovelace could speak, but when hunting pressure becomes extremely great on a particular parcel, they have ways to manage that through special hunts and things of that nature to try and reduce some pressure. But I know the department tries to make access as open as possible so everybody can enjoy it.
Okay.
Other questions?
Yes,
Senator Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your today. Who does the appraisal on the thing?
it would be an independent appraisal that we'd probably agree on mutually with the department on who that would be. So I'm not sure. I'm sure. I suspect the department has some requirements about who they can use for an appraiser. So okay, sure.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next, we'll have Mark Schiegel on from Ducks Unlimited on WebEx. Welcome, committee, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am currently and have been a volunteer for many years with Ducks Unlimited. I've been a local chair, state chair. I'm currently a regional vice president covering Kansas, Colorado, Nebraska, and South Dakota, and a resident of Kingman County, living in Kingman for close to 30 years. So I'll give you a little bit of a local touch of the area. I've spent a lot of time on the what used to be the Kingman Wildlife Area, now the Byron Walker Wildlife Area, named after Mr. Byron Walker, who managed it for many years. I knew Byron personally, and I know he's smiling down on us as we enhance what he worked on and developed over many years. A little expansion on things that were mentioned. The land swap, I would like to personally thank our past representative from this area, Jack Timish, and Secretary Lovelace for working this arrangement out where the current tenants, the DeWeese family, who had a high interest in tillable ground, worked out a land swap where they had some ground coming out of CRP contract, which was tall grass prairie, which they didn't have a need for, but the department and the Byron Walker Wildlife Area could use greatly as wildlife habitat. So there was a trade arranged where the DeWeese family got the crop ground. The department will get this land coming out of CRP contract. And another side benefit of this CRP ground, it's on the south side of the river adjacent to this tract, and it provides another county road access to some of the wildlife area that was currently landlocked. It was very difficult to get to. So it was a win-win for everyone, and it's really an example how people with different interests can work together in government these days, which seems to be rather uncommon, that things can happen. And I'm proud of what DU, the department, the legislature has done on this. A little bit more information about the local area. I personally helped brief the Chamber of Commerce, the City Commission and the County Commission, who were both thoroughly in favor of this, and also the local Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau ended up, both the local and state, with no comment because they saw this land swap as a win-win for everyone, a win for agriculture, a win for the people of Kansas. You've heard the glowing comments about the Byron Walker Wildlife Area. I got a personal connection in many ways. I spent a lot of time hunting, hiking with my labs there and exercising them. If you look above my right shoulder on the video, you see a turkey tail on the wall. That was the first turkey I ever took, and it came from the Byron Walker Wildlife Area. So this area is valuable for hunters, for recreation, you name it. It's a beautiful place. You've heard about it. It is the single largest source of people coming to Kingman County of anything we have. It's a source of income in a largely agricultural county that's a rare commodity these days. It brings money to Kingman that is invaluable for an agricultural town. I personally am a semi-retired test pilot. I currently do some contract work for Texas Cessna. I have a meeting with them this afternoon. I wanted to be there with Jim and Brad, but we'll make it work on WebEx. So as a resident of Kingman, and a volunteer of DU, I encourage the committee and the Senate to approve SB 145 to expand the Byron Walker Wildlife Area. And I'll be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you for your time.
Mark, questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mark. Next, we'll have Kent Keene with the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation on WebEx. Kent, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to make sure everybody can hear me all right.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. As he said, my name is Kent Keene, and I'm the Senior Coordinator of Lower Midwestern States and Agriculture Policy for the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. We are a 501c3 nonprofit who works with Congress, governors, and state legislatures to protect and advance hunting, angling, recreational shooting, and trapping. I appear before you today to voice our support for Senate Bill 145. And really not going to say much that you haven't already heard today, but wanted to point out that by permitting the Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism to purchase this tract in Kingman County, you're further allowing KDWPT to accomplish their mission of conserving Kansas's fish and wildlife resources while providing quality access and opportunity for the Sunflower State sportsmen and women. Now, as Secretary Lovelace pointed out, in Kansas, sportsmen and women generate more than $48 million annually in conservation funding for the department's fish and wildlife programs through the American System of Conservation Funding. Now, this system includes the sale of hunting and fishing licenses, as well as self-imposed federal excise taxes on hunting and fishing equipment. Further, hunters and anglers contribute an estimated $629 million annually to the Kansas economy, supporting more than 9,000 jobs while engaging in their outdoor pursuits. Unfortunately, participation in our outdoor traditions has been declining. Now, recent surveys, as Secretary Lovelace reported, say that about 46% of hunters nationwide cited a lack of access as taking away from their enjoyment of hunting and influencing their decision not to hunt. Now, passing Senate Bill 145 would allow the department to take steps to address this decline and attempt to reverse it. Now, many of us are aware of the importance of hunting and angling to Kansas's culture. Senate Bill 145 represents a chance to provide additional opportunities to introduce our neighbors, particularly those in a highly populated area like Wichita, to this culture and to the outdoor activities that many of us hold near to our hearts. Now, given the challenges that we've all endured during this last year, the importance of these opportunities has become all the more apparent. Now, taking all this into account, I respectfully ask that each of you support Senate Bill 145 and allow the department to acquire this property, which will then be open to and managed for Kansas's many residents, including the sportsmen and women who so significantly support the department and the Kansas economy. And with that, I'd like to thank you all again and would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kent. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. We also have written only from the Nature Conservancy. And are there any opponents? Any neutral? Seeing none, we will close our hearing on Senate Bill 145. Next, we will move on to a hearing on House Bill 2270, modifying the distribution of the levy on fire insurance business premiums to the State Fire Marshal Fee Fund, the Emergency Medical Service Operating Fund, and the Fire Service Training Fund. And we'll have an overview with Chris Wagner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Chris Wagner from the Revisor's Office, here to brief HB 2270. Hello, committee. HB 2270, as the chairman said, modifies the distribution of the levy on fire insurance business premiums and the way those levies are distributed into the Fire Marshal Fee Fund, the Emergency Medical Services Operating Fund, and the Fire Service Training Program Fund. So current law in KSA 75-1508 requires fire insurance companies doing business in Kansas to pay a levy to the Commissioner of Insurance that may be equal to a total of 1.25% to maintain those entities that I just described. Specifically, the levy amounts in that statute cannot exceed 0.80% to maintain the office of the State Fire Marshal, 0.25% to maintain the Emergency Medical Services Board, and 0.2% to maintain the Fire Service Training Program. So that's where the total of 1.25% comes from. And then KSA 75-1514, which is the statute that this bill is amending, then describes how to distribute those levies that are collected. So this bill 2270 was modeled after a proviso that's been in the budget bill in recent years to determine how the levy should actually be distributed as opposed to how it's written in the statute right now. So the statute would be amended to provide that the state treasurer should credit 10% of each such levy or deposit to the state general fund, and that those deposits should not exceed an aggregate amount of $100,000. And then once that $100,000 is met, or after the 10% gets taken off the top, the bill provides that the remainder of those deposits should be distributed in percentage amounts starting with 64% to the State Fire Marshal Fee Fund, 20% to the Emergency Medical Services Operating Fund, and 16% to the Fire Service Training Program Fund. So, and those percentages are just corresponding to the levy amounts that maintain each of those offices or programs. And then the bill further just goes on to specify that the amounts credited to the SGF are related to reimbursement for accounting, budgeting, and other administrative related expenses performed on behalf of those three entities. And just as an additional note, the bill passed out of House Committee on Transportation and Public Safety budget with no amendments and passed the House 123 to 1. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Chris? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris, I was wondering when I was reading through this, when you say gross cash receipts from all fire insurance premiums in Kansas, how much money are we talking about that comes in to that we're taking 100,000 out of? You got any idea?
I do not have those numbers. I believe Aaron Clausen might with KLRD. I'll let him kind of fill that in.
How did we decide on the 100,000? That's my question, I guess.
The 100,000 was the proviso amount, and I just modeled that after that. So I'm not exactly sure how it got to the aggregate amount of 100,000. I think that actually might be related to another statute that requires those related administrative expenses. It's just kind of repeating that in this statute.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Chris. Next, we'll move on to the proponents, and we have the State Fire Marshal, Doug Jorgensen. Welcome, committee, Doug.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members, for allowing me to appear here today in support of HB 2270 and with a little bit of information. I think the background's been discussed, but over a number of years now, both the budget director's office, our office, and legislative staff have had to make sure that there was a proviso added to the final budget bill each year to accomplish the SGF transfer and also set the limit on the amount the SGF transfer could be. This bill simply moves that proviso into the actual statute so that the legislature doesn't have to address that proviso issue going forward. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Are there questions? Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doug, how much does that 64% of that raise for the state fire marshal?
Approximately $5.2 million.
And then only 100,000 can be transferred to state general fund, is that?
The 100,000 comes off the top of all three agencies. We get around just over 5 million. I think the Board of EMS and KU Fire each get around a $2 million figure out of that. There's about $170 million that goes to the SGF. And then there's 200 and some million dollars that goes to a program that KDHE has. And that's how those funds are distributed each year.
So explain to me the 100,000 again.
That's the fee that's set by the legislature that goes to SGF to help fund the administrative costs that Department of Administration or that other state agencies have with helping with state agencies with their IT infrastructure, different things like that. It's a regular fund that comes out of a lot of state agencies that go to the SGF to fund services that the state provides.
And that money's coming out of this insurance fee fund, is that right?
Yes, it comes off the top before any money is distributed to any of the three agencies.
And you mentioned that goes for IT. Does that go for IT stuff for EMS and the fire service training program also?
Well, it doesn't actually go to IT for each agency. It goes to the state to pay overall state expenses for supplying IT support to state agencies.
So not just for your agency or the.
Correct.
Thank you for that. And you said that this actual insurance levy generates how much total money?
Last time I checked, it generates about $172 million to the state general fund. It generates about just over $9 million to the three agencies that are in this bill. And then I think it generates a little bit over $2 million to $200 million to a program that KDHE has. And that comes from the insurance commissioner's office. They track all that. That's their responsibility to receive those monies from the insurance companies that do business in the state and then distributed those to the state agencies that they need to go to.
And then my last clarification question, that's a 1.25% that's essentially tacked on to insurance policies, is that?
Well, and I imagine the insurance companies can pass that on to their policyholders, but it's not really tacked on. It just comes out of the amount of policies that the insurance companies actually sell in the state.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony here today. Did I hear you say that there's $172 million that comes from this fee fund into our state general fund?
I believe there is, and again, I think you'd have to clarify that with the insurance commissioner's office, but the last report we received from them showed that much going to the SGF, and then just over $9 million going to the three agencies in this bill.
Follow up, if I may, Mr. Chair. Does it seem like that amount of money coming from that fee fund should cover $100,000 worth of IT support? Why are we taking an additional $100,000 when that fund is already generating hundreds of millions of dollars for SGF?
I don't know if the money that's going to SGF has this fee attached to it or not.
Wouldn't it make sense just to allocate whatever is necessary, that 100,000 out of the 170 that goes in there? I'm just asking. Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Doug. We also have written only from Joseph House, the Executive Director of the EMS Board. Are there any opponents here today or on WebEx? Any neutral? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on HB 2270. And I think we'll wait to work these bills till tomorrow when the rest of we have a couple members that had some prior commitments. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.